Mark, good morning. It's a new year.
Yeah, may
And
I
all
say
that.
Happy New Year for the last time? I'm sick of it already. Okay, saying Happy New Year. Okay, so have a fabulous
Okay,
2026,
yes.
everybody, and you won't get any more Happy New Years from me. Okay, in fact, I
I,
couldn't be
it
happier
is
that the
cool, so.
holidays are over. I've had enough of being on holiday, relaxing, and having fun. Hey, Tim, isn't it great to be back in the struggle? Huh? No.
No,
But I mean, listen, we've survived
not
the
really.
toughest week of the year is the first week of January. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, is it?
because
Just
yeah,
what,
because
mentally?
everybody
Because
goes into
you're,
self-introspection. And sadly, when you look inside, you kind of self over-reflect,
oh,
eh? And you go, oh, why
okay.
didn't I and why
Wow.
do you do that, Tim?
No,
You
I, I,
celebrate the being that
I,
you are.
no, I've just made so many mistakes now over my
Yeah,
entire existence. And I've taken so many
yeah,
wrong paths that just the idea of looking back
yeah,
at any of them and trying to assess the situation,
yeah,
it's too much.
yeah,
Rather
yeah.
look forward.
In fact,
It's more fun.
say this.
But I mean, I do feel like you wrote this week
Yeah,
about aging, and I do feel like I'm
yeah.
aging.
There's no more
Um,
accurate or truthful statement than you can make that you are aging. I mean, that is
right.
one of the things that we are all doing.
Yes.
It's a question of how you deal with it. But you're talking about the past. I think
Right.
wars are essentially between people who've got unhappier pasts than their dreams for the future. That's my statement of the year.
Oh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
that's a good
they're
point.
clinging on, and I'm going to just do my little age thing since we're on it. I looked at the ages
Okay.
of the world's leaders: Putin 73, Trump 79, Xi Jinping 72,
Right.
Khamenei 86, Netanyahu 76, whatever. And so we can carry on. Modi 75, Cyril is
Right.
73. The average there is 76, which in
Yes.
golf, if
Right.
you get 7 and 6, that is to say, if you 7 holes up with 6 to play, it's called a dog license because that's what you used to pay for a dog license in the good old days, 7 shillings and sixpence.
Oh,
So
okay.
7 and 6
All
in
right.
golf is a dog license,
Right.
and our leaders are all too old and still fighting.
I feel 6-7.
So you're still ahead. You got
Um,
7 to play.
no. 6-7 was one of the words of the
Oh,
year
is it?
because 6-7 is the millennial term for what we would have described as whatever. So now people say 6-7.
No, Tim.
So I'm telling you a new
Yeah,
word that you probably
yeah,
haven't
yeah,
heard
Tim.
because I
Yeah, Tim.
hadn't.
I mean, I'm sorry, you operate in a little, special universe. No one has heard of 6-7.
Every evil.
Oh, yeah.
You might be showing your age.
So 6-7 is a new. Is it because it's 2026? Anyway, I don't know. I mean, back to war for a bit.
Okay. The year started off with a
Yeah, with a
bang.
lot of bangs, actually. Yeah.
Shall we?
You know
Yeah,
what? We
there was a lot
haven't.
of bangs. Yeah,
To be
yeah,
serious for 2 seconds, people have died in
yeah.
this Venezuela escapade, if I might call it that. Yeah, and it's
Yes.
Venezuela today, Greenland tomorrow, 6-7 the world, or whatever the right expression is.
Right.
I mean, and I'm afraid the Oaks lost it, man. If I might say so. Having said that,
Yes.
you invade one country, Tim, and then there you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, one goat. Anyway, yeah. What do you think of it all, Tim? Is
Right.
this all going to disintegrate or explode?
Well, first of all, you just have to take it as read that Venezuela has been an absolute
Yeah,
disaster,
that's true.
and that we, in a sense, we are celebrating the departure of a complete
Yeah,
nitwit who completely
yeah,
destroyed his country. And it's significant for us, by the way, because they're allies of
yeah.
ours. And because the ANC Youth League and the EFF all think that Venezuela was just a brilliant, anti-imperialist thing. And what they did was they caused the forced immigration of 9 million people. So, I mean, we're not shedding any tears
No,
for
I'm
Mr.
not shedding
Maduro,
any tears for
whatever.
him. Yes.
Okay, so they take
Yeah,
that
yeah.
as read, right? And then the second thing is, what does it mean? Well, the initial reaction of sort of most foreign affairs commentators was this opens the way for China to invade Taiwan, for Russia to invade Ukraine.
Rubbish. Okay. Just because
Yeah,
it,
no, I mean they
yeah.
didn't need this
No, no,
as an
no, no, no.
excuse to do
Sorry,
what
sorry.
they did. Clearly, because
Yeah,
Russia
yeah,
has already
yeah.
done it.
Russia's
So
way ahead of
guess
the
what?
game. Yeah. They
Yeah.
defined the
Yes.
continuing imperialism of the world. Okay.
But in a kind of residual way, I mean, it does make you think that this idea of superpowers, spheres of influence, is sort of back on the agenda. So that, to me, at least, is a
Well,
conceptual
yes.
possibility that that the superpowers have decided that they're going to
Might
exert their
is
power
right. Hmm.
regionally because they can no longer exert it
Well,
globally. And I think that is
let's go
genuinely
to
true.
the existing mechanisms of law in the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council and its ineptitude, if I might say so. I mean, I don't know if these bodies are even relevant because they seem to have no bite and they bark a
Yes.
hell of a lot. They're like the most irritating species of dog, if I might say so. But here's the conundrum or the irony. The Security
Right.
Council,
Right.
if they were to overrule Trump's actions, would themselves be imposing on the sovereignty of nations. Okay, so to punish an imposition on someone else's sovereignty, you have to, in fact, yourself impose on theirs. So there's the irony of it all. The solution cannot lie in those who preside over the law which seeks to protect sovereignty and yet overrule it.
I mean, international law is essentially
Census.
and if leaders don't agree, then
Then,
there is no
then
law.
they
I did some research into this, and then I came across the interesting subject of the Peace of Westphalia, which obviously you know about.
oh, but refresh my memory. I mean, what the hell? For the sake of the listeners,
Okay.
Tim, come on. Yeah, yeah,
The Peace of Westphalia was the culmination of the 30 Years' War. So the 30 Years' War was actually, people remember, the devastation caused in Germany, amongst other places, by the First World War and the Second World War. But actually, the 30 Years' War was in terms of the proportion of the population lost, was just absolutely devastating for basically the entire
yeah.
Central Europe, and much more devastating
Wars
than
are.
Second World
Yeah,
War. And after that 30-year period, this is where the idea of sovereignty really arose, was because the European sort of jurists at the time came to the realization that if everybody claims the right to intervene in everywhere else, then what you end up with is, a war forever.
mm.
So, the sanctity of leaders and all of that sort of stuff, emanates from the Peace of Westphalia,
Well, let
which
me
brought
say
in,
this.
which was the
When you say
30-year.
war
Yeah,
forever, it has an economic undertone to it. Okay. I think that
right.
economically, America needs to be at war. They need to be at least under the threat of war because the size of their defense spend
Yes,
and defense, which they're now calling it tax
I know.
spend or
It's just
whatever, it's
shocking.
just,
Yeah, yeah,
it's there. It's an entire,
yeah,
I don't know how big it is, but it used to be the biggest number in their GDP. Okay. It was defense spending. And so you
yeah,
kind of have to be at
yeah.
war if you're making all the war stuff. Clearly, in South Africa, we don't have to be at war because I've seen what we're doing in our
Yes.
defense force. I don't know if you saw the guys rolling around at the on the stadium, and if you saw
Oh no, it was very
and
impressive. I did
yeah,
see it.
and
It
if you
was
saw the
the way they rolled. Just they just
rolling
kept
and round,
rolling.
roly
It was
poly,
fantastic.
and if you saw, our boat, or no, ship in Simon's Town that
Right.
contributed to the, somewhat contentious, what is it, war games that we're playing down
Yes.
there and so on. But here's what I think is at the center of it all, and I think it's about to be challenged: the concept of presidential
Right.
executive authority, executive order. So now I think
Okay.
Congress is finally standing up and going, hang on a second, but they don't use the word but because that would be yeah, anyway, so I
I
don't know
know.
what they use there, but
I know.
this is the things. The people are starting to stand up and go like, excuse me, next time you want to invade a country, I think you should ask Congress for permission.
Yes.
Okay. And so that is
Yes.
crossing party lines. Okay. That is starting to go into the
Yeah.
Republican faithfuls, and they're starting to say, this oak's losing it.
No, no, no. And there's a corollary to that because, infamously, you could say Trump has declined to renew
Yeah.
AGOA, the
It all.
African Treaty. Well, apparently there are two bills that have just sort of heading towards a vote in Washington that revive it for 3 years. So, it may be back. And I think that's because the congressmen and senators in America see the utility of these things. Their noses are a bit out of joint because they are also in contest, in a
Mm.
sense, with the
Well, it introduces another point to me, which is that it seems to me, bringing it home a bit, it seems to me that the
right.
less there is to fight over, the more fighting there is about it.
I
Because
suppose.
across
Yes.
all our political parties, okay, there is now
Right.
infighting, which is, you know, in the public domain, and no one's escaping
Right.
it. If you look at
Yes.
the Gwede Montage versus Fikile Mbulele versus Lesotho versus all of them, maybe it's just electioneering or something, but they're all starting to gainsay one another
Right.
and to start fighting with each other. The DA fight is
Yeah.
beyond. Okay, it's like between George and Okamp and Steenhuisen, there's
Yes.
just a gemors, to use another American term.
Yes.
And as for incompetence, and the place is a mess. And I can't think of
Yes.
anyone that has been put forward or stood up as the next government in waiting that is worthy of
Yes.
consideration. The incumbents are clinging on to less and less actual power because it's all they've got. If I,
I completely agree. I mean, you know what is very revealing is the ANC has just had its January 8th
yeah,
statement and its celebration, and there's
114th
a big
birthday.
cake, and
Yeah.
they cut the cake, etc. So, yeah, precisely. So they announced with fanfare six priorities for
I can't wait. This is
2029.
all new. We'll probably
Oh,
never
no,
have
no,
it
it's
before.
not. In fact, it's going to be
Yeah,
exactly, it's precisely the same as the ones they
yeah.
had last
Anyway,
year. And that's also a consequence of leaderships
vacuum.
in a state of
Mm.
disarray because they are not able to impose on their parties a way forward that's remarkable or different or innovative. I can say the six priorities that the ANC is putting forward for
Tell me, but
2026,
but
the
if I
top
if
one
I
is
nod off
fix.
if I nod
Yeah,
off
yeah.
as you're going through the list, just shout at the end. Yeah, carry on. Go for it.
Okay. No, I'll just tell you
Yeah,
the first one, and this will really shock you. The first one is to fix local
there you
government
go.
and improve basic services. There you
No, who
go.
would have thought?
I know who
Who
ever
thought
thought
it?
of that, and why did no
Why
one
didn't
think
they
of
think
that
of it?
over the last 30
Here's.
years?
I think people
Yeah,
are starting to think of it. I've seen gogos pitching
yeah,
up at rallies and
yes,
challenging the politicians and saying, "Yeah, man."
yeah,
And I believe Mashatile was booed off the stage, and the president was challenged by ordinary people in the street saying, "Listen, what you doing here? What have you come for? Why have
yes,
you come to
no,
visit us
exactly,
again?" Because last
yes,
time, and
yes,
so that groundswell, if it's not going too far through the ANC Youth League, who the president fell little short of enticing to revolution in his speech. So I think the time is up for the incumbents. What worries me is that I don't know whether we know the truth of despair. Now, I'm not wanting to go down that rabbit hole, but I really don't
okay,
know what our balance sheet really looks like. When people talk about Eskom making a profit, but they haven't provided for bad debts, and when basically the accounting rules don't apply, it's very difficult to pass judgment on the
right,
financial state of affairs of our country. And no matter who took over, Tim, and the sooner the better,
right.
it would be a deep dive into a turnaround plan that would have to be so convincing that we could get international capital to come to the rescue. And that's my view from someone who's going nowhere.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, you have to guard against being too despondent.
Yeah,
But to me, stasis is intrinsically
yeah.
depressing. What we're looking at in South Africa is basically a holding operation. People sort of spoke about the 10 lost years. Every year that passes, I get more convinced that that was another year
Mm,
lost. The most convenient, the most kind of knee jerk statistic is the GDP growth. It's not as though the politicians are unaware of that necessity. We have had successive attempts to attract investment. We're always talking about attracting investment. I mean, from a verbal point of view, you do get affirmation of that idea,
mm.
right? What's completely lacking is a through going understanding of how to achieve
Well,
that.
the truth.
What
Let's
it
start with
means.
the truth. I mean, let's start with proper accounting, universally applied, generally accepted accounting principles. And then let's go, here's the truth and
Yes,
here's the plan. That is an investable thing, even if you
right.
have to have what we do in the corporate world, a deep discount rights offer in South Africa. And then you better choose, because I saw
Yes,
last night the president got on a plane to UAE. I'm not sure what he's going to do there. But what we're
right.
doing is we're actually borrowing ourselves into a standstill.
There is a lot of
Yeah.
stasis in
Yeah.
South Africa. That is something that we could really usefully break out
Yeah.
of this
Come
in a
on.
sense of ongoing
Yeah.
sameness
No.
about that. I think would be really great. Can we talk about the international world just very quickly, because I have something that is very complicated, and I think it's so complicated that only you will be able to
Okay,
tell me
Tim,
the
we can
answer.
finish now if you like.
Are we in an AI investment bubble?
Yeah. Well, let me inform my response as follows. I
Okay.
never got the beginning of the bubble, so I doubt I'm capable
Okay.
of getting the end. So, because I think it's actually gone into another dimension. That will be its savior. Let me give you that perspective. So, for example, I think we're going to
Right.
move past our conventional understanding of cellular telephone networks into satellite
Right.
direct communication. I think we're going to move past AI and GPT and all of those things into its physical manifestation in robotics and in whatever. Okay. I
Yes.
think if you compare the state and the value propositions in AI that present to us in the
Right.
markets and so on, you are doing so against an aged metric. Okay. I mean, people are still talking
Right.
about PE multiples and net asset value. That stuff doesn't matter anymore. Okay. Unless you're talking about really conventional business like maybe retailing or something like that. I don't know
Right.
what the landscape looks like, so it's hard to judge the bubble. Take that.
Okay. No, no, no. I mean, it's just so interesting to me because there is this thing called a reversion to
Yeah, I
mean
know that
bubble.
one.
And that's what we're looking at with AI because it's quite interesting. There are good parts of bubbles,
Mm.
right? I
Like
mean, in
balls.
a
Yeah.
sense, no,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
there's
sorry,
that.
sorry. I was just wondering. My mind was wondering. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
slight
Yeah.
deviation from
Yeah.
the. But you know, railways, global railways, were initially a bubble, and the people who got caught in the bubble lost a
Yeah.
lot of money. But they also
Yeah.
revolutionized the world. You know,
Yeah.
in back in the day. So, you know, in a sense, AI is in the same kind of category. This is something that will definitely change the world, but it will also, as we know from previous bubbles, there will be a reversion to
Yeah.
mean. But I do think, as you know, it's one of the easiest predictions you can ever make. It's you know, when you're looking at what's going to happen over the next year, one of the things you can say quite easily and without fear of contradiction, yes, that this will be the year of the application of AI.
Yeah.
So we will see AI. You know, even if it
I'm
doesn't
kind of
exist,
sad
people
about
will
that
talk
in a
about
way, you know. I'm kind of
it.
sad about that in the sense that what becomes of us? What becomes where to original thought and all of that good stuff? But I'm a naive guy in this subject
Right,
matter. I've never used AI and I've never asked GTP for anything because I'd like to sort of retain my intellectual integrity, eat that. And so, because I'm not a lowest common denominator, man, which is why I'd never be a successful politician because they seem to seek out the lowest common denominator amongst people. But yeah, I don't know, Tim.
okay,
I think I go back to, what's the playing field look like? People are talking about trains that go 700 kilometers an hour.
right,
Now, if you went back not
right,
very long, someone would tell you that that's absolutely impossible. But they hadn't thought about
right.
electricity and magnets rather than rails and steel. And so I don't know the answer. But as I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
I've got matric. Now, the matric
Right.
results come out today. The matric comes
Okay.
out, and,
Oh,
and
good.
I hope they give some insight into what's happening because I fear
Right,
that with all of these changes in pass marks, we're going to get a lot more people getting matric than people who can get jobs with that matric. And so, anyway, it's back
right.
to school, and you kids who are going to school, you're
Back to the
lucky, man.
year.
School is a privilege.
Yes,
It's a fabulous thing. Learning is a great thing. And for goodness sake, stop asking your computer for the answers. So it's back to
yes,
school, Tim.
yes. And I can say this
Yeah,
with authority. It's not
it's
six
not
seven.
6-7. Eh? I'm going to use that word frequently until even my best friends go, Mark, what the hell does that mean? Okay. Have a great 2026, peoples. And that's the last time I'm saying Happy New Year.
Okay. Me too.
Cheers, people.
Cheers, everyone.